The night is quiet, too quiet. The wind whispers through the trees, carrying secrets older than the moon. Shadows stretch and twist, reaching toward the light, seeking what they have lost or what you have yet to find. You've come here for stories, haven't you? Tales to chill your spine, to curl your fingers around the firewood and make you doubt the safety of your own bed. Tales of forests that watch, ponds that remember, gates that should never open, and lanterns that burn with bones long forgotten. I am your host tonight. I am the one who lingers in the flicker of the firelight, whose shadow leans just a little too close. I have seen what waits beyond the veil of normalcy, and I am here to guide you into it. Each story you hear will pull you a little further from warmth, from comfort, from the world you know. And in the silence that follows, you may hear the whispers, those who came before, those who linger still. But do not fear, or perhaps do. Tonight, the fire is ours, and the stories are endless. So lean in, listen closely, keep your eyes on the flames, and remember, once a story begins, it never truly ends. Welcome to the world of tales from the shadows. The candle in the window, opening. The fire was low, just embers glowing red like the eyes of something half asleep. The circle had grown quiet after the last story. Everyone staring into the flames, listening to the forest creak and sigh around them. Then, with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes, Tyler leaned forward and said, "All right, I've got one. It's about a light. Candle, actually. But not just any candle. The one in the farmhouse window. The legend, they say out past the ridge, where the dirt road forks and one way leads nowhere, there's an old farmhouse. Been abandoned for decades, but the second-floor window always has a candle burning. It doesn't matter if it's raining, snowing, or storming like hell. The flame never goes out. Locals say the house belonged to the Greaves family. Poor farmers, but proud. During a blizzard one winter, their youngest daughter, Sarah, wandered from the house looking for her dog. She never came back. The parents searched the woods for days. They hung lanterns from the trees, called out her name, begged the storm to give her back. But it was no use. Sarah was gone. Mrs. Greaves put a candle in the window that night, swearing it would burn until Sarah found her way home. She sat at that window for the rest of her life, watching. When she died, the candle stayed lit, and it's been lit ever since. The dare. Of course, kids made it into a dare. Drive out past the ridge, find the house, walk up to the window. If you look in and see the candle burning, you have to step inside. They say no one who stepped inside ever came back. Some say they get trapped in the storm no matter the season. Others say Sarah's voice calls them deeper into the house. And some swear they see Mrs. Greaves at the window waiting. The campers. When Tyler finished, the woods seemed darker. The group shifted nervously, fire popping. "Come on," laughed Jenna, though her voice trembled. "It's just a story." "Not really," Tyler said. "My cousin swears he saw the candle last summer. He and his friends went up there on a dare. One of them never came home." "Bull," said Marcus, but he didn't sound convinced. That's when Daniel, quiet Daniel, the one who always took things a little too seriously, spoke up. "I know where that farmhouse is." Everyone looked at him. "I grew up 2 towns over. My dad told me never to go near it. Said the candle was a trick. Said if you see it, it means something's already looking at you." The journey, they should have laughed it off. Should have let the story fade like smoke. But the fire was dying, the night too heavy, and fear has a way of twisting into dares. By midnight, the group was on the dirt road, flashlights in hand, following Daniel. The woods pressed close on either side. The night was colder here, as if the trees themselves were warning them back. And then, after the fork at the window, no one wanted to admit their legs were shaking, but no one wanted to turn back either. "See," Tyler whispered. "It's real." The closer they got, the clearer it burned. A pale, flickering flame behind warped glass. "All right," Jenna said, forcing a laugh. "We came, we saw, that's good enough." But Marcus had already stepped onto the porch. The wood groaned under his weight. "Dare's not complete," he said. We have to look inside. Don't, Daniel hissed. His voice was urgent now, panicked. You don't want to, but Marcus ignored him. He pressed his face to the glass, peering in. Yeah, he said after a moment, voice trembling. It's just a candle. That's all. Then his flashlight sputtered out. Inside, Marcus cursed, banging the flashlight. The other's beams swung wildly, catching peeling wallpaper, broken floorboards, and the faint outline of stairs. And that glow upstairs, warm and steady. Let's go, Marcus said. If it's just a candle, then. And oh, Daniel snapped. Don't you get it? If it was just a candle, it wouldn't still be burning. It's not light keeping us out. It's bait pulling us in. The words hung in the cold air. And then, from somewhere inside the house, came the faintest sound. A girl's voice, calling. Hello? Is someone there? The trap. Jenna gasped. That sounded like a kid. Sarah, Tyler whispered. The voice came again, closer now. Please, I'm cold. Help me. Marcus took a step forward, but Daniel grabbed his arm. She's been dead 100 years, he said. If you go in there, you won't come out. The candle flame seemed to waver, though there was no wind. For the first time, the group realized something. The light wasn't just glowing, it was pulsing, almost like it was breathing. And the voice was at the foot of the stairs now. Please, don't leave me alone. The ending, what happened next, no one fully agrees on. Some say Marcus broke free and went inside. Some say the door slammed shut on its own. But all of them swore to the same thing. The candle flared bright, filling the window with light, then went out. For the first time in 100 years, the farmhouse was dark. They ran. They didn't stop until the fire was in sight again. And when they counted heads, Marcus was gone. Afterward, Tyler finished the story, voice low, fire crackling. Some say if you drive past the farmhouse now, the candle is burning again. But if you look too closely, you'll see there's someone new sitting in the window, waiting. Not Sarah, not Mrs. Greaves, someone else. Someone who thought it was just a story. The woods around the campfire seemed to lean closer, listening. No one spoke. No one wanted to. The fire popped once, sharp as a gunshot. And then the night swallowed the sound whole. The fire cracked, sending sparks drifting like tiny restless spirits. The storyteller's eyes glimmered in the dim light, half hidden in shadow. Some nights, they whispered. The dark does not end with the story. It lingers, curling around your shoulders, tugging at your thoughts, until you feel watched. The air holds secrets, things that creep just beyond the edges of your vision, waiting for the right moment to slip closer. They leaned in, voice dropping to a hiss. The next story, it begins where silence grows too heavy, and the woods themselves seem to hold their breath. Shall we listen closely? Shall we see what waits when the night is absolute? A low wind stirred the leaves, carrying a faint, chilling murmur. Prepare yourself for ashes in the wind. Ashes in the wind. The setup. The fire had burned down to coals, glowing faintly like eyes in the dirt. No one wanted to move, though the night air had grown colder. A whip of wind swept through the trees, and with it came a voice. This time it was Jenna who spoke. Her voice carried low, like she wasn't sure she wanted to tell the story but couldn't hold it back. This one's true. It happened near my hometown. The papers wrote it off as an accident, but people know better. They say the dead don't like being scattered. They always find their way back. The pact. 5 friends had grown up together in a small, nowhere town. The kind of place with 1 diner, 1 gas station, and more graves than living people. When one of them, Kelsey, died young, just 23, a sudden heart attack, the group decided to honor her wish. She'd always joked she wanted her ashes scattered in the woods where they used to hang out. It wasn't legal. They weren't supposed to, but they did it anyway. On the night of the funeral, they drove out together with the urn, hiked into the trees they all knew by heart, and poured her ashes into the wind. The gray dust scattered, whirling into the branches, drifting into the dark. They laughed nervously, cried some, toasted her memory with cheap whiskey. Then they left, thinking it was done. But it wasn't. The first night. The next morning, Aaron, the one who'd carried the urn, woke up with his hands coated in fine gray powder. He scrubbed and scrubbed, but it clung under his nails, clung to the lines of his skin. That night, when he turned off the lights, he heard whispering in his apartment. Not words, not really, just the sound of ash stirring in a breeze. By the second night, the whispers shaped themselves into something else. A voice. "Why did you leave me there?" Aaron moved out of his apartment a month later. Didn't matter. The whispers followed. The return. The others began to notice things too. Lila found her car dusted every morning, even when it rained. Brandon's dog barked at corners, first standing on end. Denise, Kelsey's best friend, swore she heard someone breathing in her room while she slept. And sometimes, when they looked in mirrors or windows, they thought they saw gray shapes drifting behind them. They tried to tell themselves it was grief, that scattering the ashes had just made it feel like she was everywhere. Until the wind changed. The wind. It was on the anniversary of her death. The five of them decided to meet again in the woods, just to be together, to drink, to remember. The night was still until they opened the whiskey. That's when the trees began to sway, though no breeze touched their faces. The wind rose from all around them, circling, pulling leaves and dirt into the air. And with it came something fine and gray, coating their clothes, their hair, their skin. "Kelsey," Denise whispered, and in the roar of the wind, they all heard it, her laugh. Except it wasn't joyful anymore. The haunting. After that night, they couldn't escape her. The ash turned up in food, in bedsheets, in lungs. Brandon coughed until he bled. Lila woke up choking on dust. Aaron said he saw her in the corner of his room one night. Not as she was in life, but pale and flaking away, skin breaking like burned paper. Her mouth opened and poured nothing but soot. "Put me back," she whispered. "Put me back together." But how do you put ashes back together? The breaking. One by one, the friends began to lose it. Brandon drowned himself in whiskey, saying the taste of smoke wouldn't leave his tongue. Lila stopped sleeping. Denise tried to burn the clothes she'd worn that night, but the smoke only made the voice louder. Aaron was the first to snap. He went back to the woods alone. They found him 2 days later, face down, lungs packed with gray dust. The urn, empty since the funeral, was clutched in his hands. The final gathering. After Aaron's death, the others gathered again, trembling and broken. They thought maybe if they did a ritual, if they said the right words, maybe Kelsey would rest. So they went back into the woods, carrying the urn. The night was heavy with silence. They placed the urn in the clearing, lit candles, whispered apologies. The air grew thick, hard to breathe. Ash swirled at their feet, circling, circling. And then, rising in the flickering light, she appeared. Kelsey. Her eyes were hollow, her mouth cracked and spilling soot. Her body was made of ash, reforming, collapsing, reforming again. "Why did you scatter me?" she asked, her voice like leaves burning. "Why did you tear me apart?" No one answered, because how could they? The ending. By dawn, only one of them staggered out of the woods. Denise, her hair gray, her skin ashen. She didn't speak a word. They say she left town that week, disappeared. But sometimes, when the wind shifts just right, people swear they hear laughter drifting through the trees. Not joyful, not free, but bitter, broken. And if you breathe too deeply, you might taste it. Ash in the wind. The fire cracked, sending shadows leaping like pale fingers across the listeners' faces. The storyteller leaned close, voice curling like smoke through the circle. Some lights are not meant to guide. Some lights are meant to call, to pull, to trap. And once you've glimpsed them, even for a moment, the forest remembers. The fog remembers. And so do I. A hush fell. The only sound was the fire, its last sparks whispering into the night. The lantern waits, and so do other things that lurk in silence, or follow the faintest glow. Shall we see what comes when the very air itself turns against you? The shadows shifted. The circle shivered. Prepare yourself for the hollow guest. The hollow guest. The telling, the fire was getting low, sparks lifting into the dark like fireflies that had lost their way. Someone tossed another log on, and the flames licked higher, throwing long shadows against the trees. "You ever hear the one about the extra camper?" Marcus said, leaning forward, voice dropping low. "Happened not far from here. Folks call him the Hollow Guest." Everyone around the fire shifted closer, waiting. The beginning. There were 4 of them on a weekend trip. College kids who wanted to get away from dorm noise and deadlines. Just the usual. Tents, beer, stories, laughter. On their second night, a man showed up. He stepped out of the trees just as the sun was dying. Middle-aged, wearing a jacket too heavy for the season, a backpack slung across one shoulder. His face was ordinary, his smile easy. "Evenin'," he said. "Mind if I warm myself a bit? Been walkin' a long stretch." They hesitated. Strangers in the woods aren't exactly comforting. But he looked harmless enough, and it felt wrong to send someone off into the dark. So they nodded. He sat down. That was when it started. The stories. The man didn't drink, didn't eat, but he sure did talk. He told stories, good ones too, about haunted towns, about creatures that followed hikers, about voices that called your name when no one was around. His voice was steady, smooth, like he'd practiced these tales 1,000 times. They asked him where he was headed. He smiled. Nowhere, just passing through. They asked where he'd come from. He tilted his head. Here and there, the fire burned lower. His face flickered in and out of shadow, and his smile never faltered. The strange things. Later that night, when the campers crawled into their tents, they whispered to each other. "Did you notice?" one asked. He didn't blink much. Another frowned. He never really said his name, did he? No one slept well. The fire outside burned steady, though no one had fed it. And through the thin nylon walls, they heard him humming. Not a tune they recognized. Something slow, circling, without an end. The morning. At dawn, he was gone. His spot by the fire was cold. His footprints led only a few paces before vanishing in the dirt. The campers laughed it off nervously. Probably just some drifter, they told themselves. But they couldn't explain the fire, still burning low, without a hint of smoke. They packed up early, deciding to head back to civilization. But the road twisted longer than they remembered. The trail forked where it shouldn't, and when they stopped to rest, he was there, sitting by a new fire, smiling. "Evenin'," he said again, though it was barely noon. The return. This time, they didn't invite him. They ran, through trees, across rocks, until their lungs ached and their legs burned. But no matter how far they went, when they stopped, he was already there, sitting, smiling, waiting by a fire. They stopped asking questions. They stopped speaking at all. Fear had sealed their throats. The last night, by the third night, only 2 of them remained. The others had vanished when the group split up, hoping someone might find a way out. But the forest stretched endless, the paths looping back, the sun never fully rising. The man sat with them again, as if he had always been there. His stories were darker now, about people losing their names, about souls that wander until they forget they were ever human. When one of them finally shouted, "What are you?" he smiled wider. His skin flickered in the firelight, showing nothing underneath but darkness. "I'm the guest," he said. "I stay when I'm welcome. I follow when I'm not." And his voice was hollow, echoing like something spoken in a cave. The ending. When search parties found the campsite weeks later, the fire still burned. There were no footprints, no gear, no bodies. Just one extra chair pulled up close to the flames. And sometimes, they say, if you camp deep enough in these woods, a man might wander out of the trees. Ordinary face, easy smile. "Mind if I warm myself a bit?" he'll ask. And if you say yes, you'll never see home again. The fire at the camp circle crackled louder, as if it understood the silence that followed. Shadows leaned in, listening. Marcus smiled faintly and tossed another stick into the flames. "Just remember," he said, "never make room for strangers at your fire. The black pond, the telling, The fire hissed as sap bled from the log, bursting into sparks. The group leaned closer, eyes wide, hungry for another tale. "Not far from here," whispered Lena. "There's a pond. Locals call it the Black Pond. Doesn't look like much by day. Small, still, nothing but reeds and mud. But at night, turns into a mirror that shows you nothing. No stars, no moon, not even your own reflection. And if you stand too close, it shows you something else entirely." The circle shifted uneasily. The forest pressed close. The beginning. The pond lay at the end of an old trail, forgotten by most. People in town warned hikers not to wander that way. They said it was bottomless, a sinkhole from when the land was young. But teenagers always dared each other, of course. One summer, 4 of them, Eli, Kara, Micah, and June, went out after dark, flashlights bobbing like weak stars. The air grew colder the deeper they went, until even the cicadas fell silent. When they reached the clearing, the pond was there, black as tar. No ripple, no reflection. The trees ended right at its edge, their roots curling into the muck as if afraid to touch the water. Kara tossed a stone in. There was no splash, no ripple, just silence. The stone was gone, like it had been swallowed whole. They laughed nervously, but no one wanted to be the first to step closer. The dare. Micah, bold and reckless, crouched at the edge. "Bet it's just algae or something. Watch." He leaned over and stared. His face wasn't there. No reflection, only darkness. Then, as he squinted, the water shifted. A shape formed, pale, thin hands reaching upward, as though someone were clawing from the bottom. He stumbled back, swearing. The others laughed it off, saying he scared himself. But when Kara looked for herself, she gasped. The hands were still there, closer now. June grabbed her arm and yanked her away. "Let's go. This isn't right." But Eli, fascinated, stepped closer. "No, wait. I see something different." The others peered in again, one by one, and each saw their own shape staring back from the void. Not reflections, versions. Dead-eyed copies. Watching. Waiting. The pull. That night, they couldn't sleep. The image of those silent doubles clung to them. By morning, Eli was gone. His sleeping bag lay empty, his shoes missing. They found his footprints leading straight to the pond. At the water's edge, they ended. Kara screamed when she saw the surface. The water rippled, not from wind, but from something moving underneath. For a split second, Eli's face appeared, staring upward, his mouth wide as if screaming, before sinking again into the void. The others dragged her back. "It wasn't him," June said, trembling. "It just wants us to believe it is." But Kara wouldn't listen. She swore she heard his voice calling from beneath. That night, she slipped away. By morning, her pack was found near the pond. The last 2. Now it was only Micah and June. They tried to leave, but the woods twisted strangely, paths looping back until they stumbled again into that same clearing. The pond waited, always waiting. At dusk, Micah thought he saw Kara standing at the opposite bank, waving. Her voice drifted faintly across the water. "Come back. It's not so bad. Just come closer." June screamed at him not to listen, but Micah's eyes glazed over. He stumbled toward the water like a sleepwalker. June grabbed him, but he was strong. Too strong. He pulled free, stepped into the water, and was gone. No splash, just silence. June collapsed at the shore, sobbing. That was when the pond rippled, and she saw them all. Eli, Kara, Micah, their faces just beneath the surface, staring with empty eyes, mouths opening and closing. And then, behind them, something larger moved in the darkness. Something with no face at all. June ran. The ending. They never found her. But hikers who wander too far sometimes find her backpack in the mud. And some swear that when they look into the pond, they see not their reflection, but her face, trapped, screaming soundlessly, begging them not to join her. Others claim the pond shows them nothing at all, until they lean just a little closer, and then the water ripples and pale hands rise. The only rule is simple: never look too long. because once it sees you, it doesn't let go. The fire at the camp circle crackled violently, as if protesting the silence that followed. Lena leaned back, her face hidden in the dark. "So," she whispered, "if you ever find still water in the woods, don't look into it. It's not your reflection staring back." The fire burned low, the last sparks curling into the night air. No one spoke for a long while. Only the forest breathed around them, shadows pressing closer. The story lingered heavy, as though the pond itself had seeped into their bones. At last, the storyteller smiled thinly. "Funny thing about water," they murmured. "It reflects what we want to see until it doesn't. Then it reflects what wants us." A log cracked in the fire, sharp as a gunshot. Someone jumped. Nervous laughter followed, but it died quickly. "Of course," the voice continued, softer now, "not all doors are made of water. Some are iron. Some are gates that stand where no gate should be. And those gates don't just open outward." The fire flickered as if caught in a sudden breath. The night leaned in. "Shall I tell you about the Iron Gate?" "Yes, the Iron Gate." The telling. The wind sighed through the trees, carrying ash and embers. The storyteller leaned forward, voice low, measured. "They say there's a gate deep in the woods. Iron, rusted, and standing all alone. No fence, no wall, no cemetery. Just a gate with no reason to be there. People find it sometimes by accident, but no one admits to looking for it. Because if you see it, you'll want to open it. And if you open it, well, that's the end of you." The discovery. It was autumn when Clara and her brother David went hiking off-trail, searching for mushrooms and adventure. The forest was damp with fog, every tree heavy with moss. They wandered too far, laughing at their own boldness, until they came upon a clearing that felt wrong. At its center stood an arching iron gate, freestanding, its hinges fused with rust. Roots curled around its base like skeletal fingers. It didn't belong. David laughed nervously. "What's it keeping out?" Clara shook her head. "No. The better question is, what's it keeping in?" They circled it warily. There was nothing beyond but more forest. And yet the air behind the bars seemed heavier, darker, as though night had pooled there. David touched the iron. It was cold. The gate shuddered. The first opening. It didn't creak. It sighed. The hinges groaned, and the gate opened just an inch. David froze. Clara whispered for him to stop, to back away, but something in his eyes had changed. "It wants me to open it," he said dreamily. "Don't you feel it?" "No," Clara snapped, tugging at his sleeve. "Let's go. Now." But David pulled free. The gate swung wider without his touch. A draft bled through, carrying the smell of damp stone, mildew, and something else, like old blood. Beyond the gate, the forest no longer looked the same. The trees were twisted, blackened, their branches curled like claws, and at their roots, faint shapes shifted in the dark, as though something crawled just beneath the soil. Clara begged him not to go, but David stepped through. What came back? The gate slammed shut behind him. Clara screamed and rattled the bars, but the iron burned her hands. David stood only a few feet away, staring at her through the bars, but his eyes were wrong. Too dark, too deep. "Don't cry," he said softly. His voice was both his own and not his own. "I'm not gone. I'm just on the other side now." Then he smiled, too wide, teeth too many. Something writhed in the shadows behind him. Hands that weren't his reached from the earth to grasp his ankles, pulling him down inch by inch. And still he smiled, even as he sank into the black soil. When the last of him vanished, the forest beyond grew still. The gate clicked shut, and Clara was alone. The return. Days later, search parties found Clara wandering miles away, mud smeared on her skin, eyes wild. She wouldn't speak of what happened, except to whisper. The gate opened itself, and he went through, and then it wasn't him anymore. No one believed her, but hikers still find the gate sometimes, and sometimes they hear voices on the other side. A brother, a sister, a lover, calling their names, begging them to open it just a little wider. And if they do, the forest always grows a little quieter afterward. The fire spat sparks into the night. Shadows crawled higher on the trees, as though listening. The storyteller's gaze swept the circle, eyes catching the firelight like an animal's. "Do you hear it?" the voice whispered. "The click of old hinges, waiting in the dark? A door is never just a door, and a gate is never only meant to keep things out." A branch snapped deep in the forest. Everyone turned, but saw nothing. When they looked back, the storyteller was smiling faintly. "Shall I tell you what happens when silence itself is broken? When the air turns dead, and something begins to listen." The fire sank lower, as though bracing itself. "Let me tell you of dead air." Dead air. The telling. The fire seemed to falter, flames thinning into smoke as the voice carried on. "There's a reason we fear silence. Not the kind filled with crickets and wind. No, the other kind. The silence that swallows. The silence that listens. Some call it dead air. And once you hear it, it hears you back." The station. In the late 1990s, a small-town radio station called WNRD sat on the edge of a crumbling industrial district. It wasn't much. Just late-night DJs, call-in shows, and static bleeding into the music. One host, a night shift DJ named Leonard, kept listeners awake with old rock records and ghost stories phoned in by truckers. He was lonely, but the airwaves made him feel less so. One night, the transmitter glitched. A song cut off mid-chord. Leonard tapped the console, muttered about bad wiring, then froze. The silence that followed wasn't silence at all. The whisper. First, it sounded like breath against the mic, soft, measured. Then a faint voice rasped through the static. "Leonard, I can hear you." He jerked upright, checked the lines. No calls had come through. The phone wasn't even ringing. "Who's on the frequency?" he demanded, masking the shake in his voice. No answer, just that terrible breath. Then laughter. Not loud, not human. Like something trying on laughter for the first time. The hairs on his arms lifted. The first call. The phone rang. Hesitant, Leonard answered. A woman's voice whispered urgently, "Don't stop talking. Whatever you do, don't let the air go dead." Then the line cut. Leonard sat rigid, heart pounding. He threw on another record, only for the sound to grind to a halt halfway through, the needle shrieking as if ripped across the vinyl. The silence came again, and in it, the voice. "You left me alone too long. Now I've found you." The audience. The next morning, Leonard quit. But WNRD had no backup, so he returned the following night, terrified but broke. Listeners began calling in strange complaints, voices whispering behind the songs, dead static breaks that stretched too long, the feeling of being watched while listening. Leonard pretended it was a gimmick, but deep down he knew the voice was real. Every time the air went silent, even for a second, it came closer. The final broadcast. Weeks later, Leonard signed on for what became his last show. He was pale, eyes hollow, trembling as though wired on more than coffee. At 3:07 a.m., the station cut into dead air. Listeners reported the silence lasted a full 3 minutes. When sound returned, it wasn't Leonard's voice. It was something else, a voice deeper, layered, wrong. It repeated his name like a chant. Leonard, Leonard, Leonard. Then a sound like dragging, scraping, and screaming, not from Leonard alone. Many voices screaming all at once. Then silence. When morning staff arrived, the booth was empty. Microphones dripped with condensation, as though someone had been breathing heavily against them for hours. Aftermath. The station shut down soon after. But sometimes, late at night, if you spin the dial just right, you'll land on dead air. And if you keep listening long enough, quiet enough, you'll hear the breath. And the voice will whisper yours. The fire hissed as a log collapsed into embers, smoke curling upward like fingers. The storyteller leaned in, voice little more than a hiss themselves. Silence is never empty. It's only waiting. And the moment you give it room, when you pause, when you falter, something else will speak for you. The wind sighed through the branches, carrying with it the faintest suggestion of a whisper. The storyteller tilted their head, as though listening. But words can vanish too, even from lips that once knew them well. Let me tell you of the one who lost her voice and came back to take yours. A spark snapped. The shadows seemed to hush. The tale of the stitched mouth. The stitched mouth. The telling. The fire had sunk low, glowing embers painting everyone's faces red. The storyteller's voice was a whisper, curling through the night air. Some secrets are too loud to keep. Others are stitched shut. And some mouths, once sewn, are never meant to open again. The beginning. In a forgotten town, rumors spoke of a woman named Alara, a midwife with hands as pale as moonlight and a smile that never reached her eyes. She helped with births, mended wounds, and healed the sick. But there was one patient she never forgave herself. Alara's husband, a cruel man, mocked her for talking too much, saying her words were poison. One night, he did something she would never forget. He stitched his own lips closed and whispered a warning to her as he bled out in the house. Never speak of what comes for those who cannot speak. The campers. Years later, a group of hikers stumbled across the ruins of Alara's house. Inside, the walls were scratched with desperate marks. Don't speak. Don't scream. Listen. They laughed nervously, dismissing it as some horror legend, until night fell. Then came the humming, soft at first, then rising in a chorus of threads and whispers, weaving through the trees. The hikers tried to flee, but the house seemed alive. Doors led nowhere. Windows reflected only darkness. One by one, the hikers felt the threads wrap their mouths, tight and unyielding. The humming whispered secrets they never knew they held, then stitched them forever. The silence. By dawn, only one hiker remained, a young woman named Mara. Her mouth ached as if sewn from the inside, though she could speak. Her voice would not obey. She stumbled out of the forest, barely alive, lips quivering. When questioned, she could only shake her head, pointing to the ruins, trembling. Later, in the dead of night, she whispered a confession. The stitched, they are waiting, waiting for voices, waiting for stories, for the words we cannot keep to ourselves. The ending. No one knows if Alara still roams, or if she is only the threads that bind the stitched. Some nights, children report whispers outside their windows, faint hums promising that silence is the safest place. And travelers who wander too close to the ruins sometimes return with lips sore, or stitched in a way that will never heal. The forest keeps its secrets well, but it always listens. The fire flickered low, shadows stretching like hands across the faces of the listeners. Silence can save you, the storyteller whispered, or it can trap you. Words are precious, but sometimes too precious, too dangerous to speak aloud. And those who ignore the warning. A branch snapped behind the group, echoing like a warning. They learn too late. Now imagine the things that hear what is unsaid, the things that stitch themselves into your very being. The storyteller leaned back, voice almost a caress. Shall we continue? There are those who watch when the shadows are long, and knock when no door is there, like the watcher in the corn. The watcher in the corn. The telling. The fire whispered as sparks drifted upward, and the storyteller's voice cut through the dark like a cold wind. Some things in the fields are harmless. Some are just shadows, and some are waiting for eyes to wander too long. Waiting in the corn. The beginning. In the Midwest, far from any town, there was a farm bordered by miles of cornfields. They called it the Hollow Farm. Locals said it had been abandoned for decades, but every autumn, the corn grew taller than anyone remembered planting it. Teenagers loved dares, and the biggest was simple. Walk the field at midnight and see the watcher. Most never went. Those who did never told anyone what they saw. The watcher appears. For friends, Jamie, Ross, Lena, and Felix thought they were brave enough. Halloween night, they crept to the edge of the field with flashlights. The corn stretched like a living wall, whispering secrets as wind brushed its leaves. They're just shadows, Felix said, trying to sound confident. Nothing to worry about. Jamie laughed, but it died when the first sound came. Not the wind, not an animal. Something breathing, slow, deliberate. A figure appeared between the stalks. No face, tall, thin, arms long enough to brush the ground. It didn't move at first, only watched. The friends froze, flashlights trembling in their hands. The chase. Jamie whispered, "Run." They bolted down a narrow path between the corn, but the figure moved faster than it should, faster than anything living. No sound but the rustle of stalks, yet it kept pace, always just behind, always watching. Felix tripped. Lena grabbed him, but Jamie kept running. When he looked back, the figure was gone. Only corn and darkness stretched behind him. They regrouped, breath ragged, but the air felt wrong, heavy, electric. The watcher had vanished, but the feeling of being watched didn't. The traps. Hours passed. They tried to find the edge of the field, but every row looked the same. Paths twisted, stalks shifted. The air carried a faint whisper. Their names. Ross stopped suddenly. The corn around him moved independently, stalks bending like limbs. A hand, skinless, thin, impossibly long, reached out from the field. He screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the corn. Lena pulled him back, but the hand clung. They tore themselves free and ran blindly. It wasn't just one watcher. There were shadows, hundreds of them, moving unseen, closing in. The escape. Dawn arrived like a knife, piercing the dark. The friends stumbled into the remnants of a dirt road, faces scratched, clothes torn, hearts hammering. The field behind them was still, corn swaying in a gentle breeze. No sign of the watcher. But sometimes, when the wind blows through the corn at night, locals swear they see tall shadows, bending between stalks, watching, waiting. And if you linger too long, the watcher might call your name. The ending. The friends made it back to town, forever changed. None spoke of the field again, though each night they woke hearing whispers, feeling eyes on them, watching from dark corners. The hollow farm still stands. The corn grows taller every year, and the watcher waits, patient as the shadows, for the next eyes to wander too long. The fire flickered low. Sparks floated like tiny embers of fear. The storyteller leaned closer, voice soft, curling around the listeners like mist. Some things in the dark are patient. They watch, they wait, and they learn what frightens you, what moves you, what makes you hesitate. A faint rustle came from the surrounding trees, and the group shivered instinctively. "The fields are full of watchers," the voice whispered, "and the night is far from over. Shall we see what waits when the world itself whispers? Let me tell you of the unfinished song." The unfinished song. The telling. The fire crackled low, shadows dancing across the faces around the circle. The storyteller's voice was soft, almost melodic, carrying through the dark. There are songs that linger, even when no one plays them. Some die unfinished. Some never should have been started. And if you hear them, they'll find a way to finish themselves. The beginning. It began with a melody, faint at first, a single note drifting through the windows of a small music school in the countryside. A group of students, Emma, Daniel, Marco, and Sophie, were practicing late one night. They were the only ones left in the building. Outside, the wind rattled the panes, carrying something soft and deliberate. Humming. Sophie paused. "Do you hear that?" "It's probably a piano from someone else's practice," Daniel said. "Old building, echoes, nothing to worry about." But the hum continued, rising and falling with an eerie perfection, always one note short of completion. The melody, curiosity overcame fear. They followed the sound up the stairwell, through empty corridors, until it led them to a locked classroom. Inside, a piano sat in the center of the room. The keys moved on their own, pressing down softly, producing a melody that was beautiful and wrong. Every time it reached the final note, it stopped. Then the air shifted. The unfinished note hovered, vibrating in the room, a presence. Emma whispered, "Someone's here." No one replied. The piano played again. the unseen. First, they thought it was a prank, but the melody followed them wherever they went. Even outside, the hum pressed against their ears. At night, they dreamed of the notes, the melody unfinished. And then things began to happen. Daniel woke up with piano keys imprinted on his palms. Marco started singing lines he'd never learned. Sophie's reflection moved independently in mirrors, lips forming the final note she could not play. Emma felt whispers crawling into her throat, forcing her to hum along. The song was completing itself through them. The completion. One night, they returned to the piano, drawn irresistibly. The room was cold, darker than it should have been. The piano played itself, each key pressing down in perfect sequence. The last note approached, and then silence. A hand, pale and delicate, rested on Emma's shoulder. The other three froze. She turned slowly. No face, only a shadow where a face should be, and the faintest outline of a mouth moving in silence. The hand pressed down on the final key. The note rang perfectly pure, and they felt it cut through them, through bone, mind, and soul. The piano stopped. The presence was gone, but the melody remained, embedded in their minds, unfinished only in memory. The ending. They left the building changed. The song haunted them. Notes whispered in their sleep, carried on the wind, always unfinished, always calling for completion. Emma never touched a piano again. Daniel refused music entirely. Marco moved to the city and buried himself in noise, trying to drown the song. Sophie walked the countryside, humming the melody at twilight, waiting for it to finish. Some say if you pass that old music school at night, you can hear it. The final note, hanging in the air, waiting for someone to complete it. The fire had burned down to embers, shadows curling like smoke snakes around the listeners. The storyteller leaned in, voice barely above a whisper, curling into the darkness like mist. Some songs are alive, they murmured. They don't end when the musician stops. They don't even end when the musician dies. They wait for ears willing to hear, hands willing to play, or mouths willing to sing. The wind sighed, carrying a faint echo of a single note. And now we come to the last story, the one that burns brightest and darkest before the fire dies. A flicker of sparks rose, casting fleeting light on the storyteller's face. The tale of the bone lantern. The bone lantern. The telling. The fire had dwindled into a pool of glowing embers, orange-red light trembling across the faces of the circle. The storyteller's voice was low, smooth, and sharp as the wind through dead trees. Some objects are more than they seem, they whispered. Some light is never meant to shine, and some lanterns burn with the bones of those who sought them. This is the story of the bone lantern. The beginning. It was a village forgotten by maps, hidden in the folds of mountains where the wind always moaned. People rarely visited, and even the locals whispered its name in fear. They called it Gallows End, for the trees at its edge were bare and twisted, their branches like hands grasping at the sky. The legend began centuries ago, when a traveler arrived carrying a lantern unlike any seen before. He said it burned with a flame that could reveal the truth, the deepest desires, the hidden sins, the things the dead had left behind. But the villagers soon discovered the truth. The lantern didn't reveal life, trapped it. Every soul glimpsed in its glow was bound to it, their bones feeding the flame. The curse. Hundreds died over generations, some from greed, some from curiosity. Every century, the lantern demanded another. Those who lit it would see the souls of the missing. They'd walk among them for one night, free to speak, free to wander. But the moment dawn broke, the light consumed them too. It was said that if the lantern ever left the village, it would roam, seeking those whose curiosity outweighed their caution. The expedition. In modern times, a group of urban explorers heard whispers of Gallows End. Mara, the last survivor of a previous tale, joined them. Leo, Nadia, Finn, and a cryptic historian named Elias. Mara had seen too much to be curious. But the others, they wanted the lantern. They reached the village at dusk. Fog rolled like liquid through the streets. Houses were empty, doors torn from hinges. And at the town square, the lantern hung from the highest gallows tree, its flame blue and shimmering like moonlight on ice. No one touched it at first. It flickered as though alive. "You don't know what you're dealing with," Mara whispered. Finn laughed. "It's just a lantern." The flame pulsed, almost imperceptibly, as though it had heard him. The flame awakens. Leo stepped forward, hand trembling, and touched the lantern. A cold burned his palm. He stumbled back, eyes wide. Within the light, shadows twisted into shapes. Faces, hands, forms of the lost from legends and nightmares. They moaned in silence, pressed close as though seeking escape. Nadia, skeptical, reached toward the lantern next. The moment she did, the flame surged upward, tendrils of blue fire reaching toward her. Her skin felt weightless, and suddenly she was somewhere else. The village as it had been centuries before, alive and burning, the villagers screaming, the lantern at the center of it all. She could hear them pleading, see their bones crawling toward the flame. And through it all, a voice, soft, endless, whispering, "Feed me, feed me, feed me." She screamed, yanking back to reality, but the vision clung. The first night, they made camp in the village church, hoping the sanctuary might protect them. But the lantern followed. Its flame seeped through the windows, brushing the walls with ghostly light. Mara warned, "Once the lantern chooses you, you're already inside. There's no hiding." Elias, the historian, smiled faintly. "We're scholars. Observation is safe." But it wasn't. At midnight, the church floor trembled. Shadows poured from the lantern's flame, moving independently, whispering secrets of their own deaths. Finn reached out to touch them. His hand passed through a shape, and he screamed as it gripped him, chilling him to the bone. By dawn, he was missing. Only his hat remained, smoldering at the lantern's base. The spiral. One by one, the explorers confronted their deepest fears. Nadia relived the day she abandoned her younger brother, forced to witness him scream through the lantern's flame for hours that felt like centuries. Leo saw visions of his own death, over and over, bone-white and agonizing, until the lantern made him repeat it in a loop that blurred reality. Elias, arrogant and smug, finally reached too far. The lantern's flame wrapped around his heart. He laughed once, and his bones vanished into the fire, leaving only ashes in the shape of his grin. Mara fought to resist. She had survived the Watcher, the pond, the stitched mouths, the iron gates. She had seen too much too young. But the lantern's pull was cunning, gentle, insidious. It whispered truths she didn't want to know, desires she didn't realize she held. The lantern speaks. That night, Mara stood alone before the lantern. Its flame burned unnaturally bright, casting her shadow across the church walls like a gnarled tree. A voice rose from the flame. "Why do you resist? You've always been here. You've always belonged." She saw herself, or a version of herself, in the flame. Pale, hollow-eyed, tethered by glowing threads to the lantern. It wasn't her reflection. It was a trap, a warning, a promise. The lantern flared, and suddenly the room was filled with all the souls it had collected. Hundreds of pale faces, eyes pleading, mouths screaming silently, their bones bright white in the blue fire. Mara realized the truth. The lantern didn't just take, collected. Every story, every soul, every whisper of fear became fuel for it to burn brighter. The confrontation. She grabbed a wooden beam from the church floor, swinging it at the lantern. It didn't shatter. The flame twisted around it like water, consuming the wood as if it had never existed. The lantern spoke again, voice calm now, almost seductive. "Some must see, some must resist, but all become light eventually. All will burn, eventually." Mara saw her choices laid bare. Touch the flame and be consumed, or leave the village and let it roam free, claiming others. Her survival instincts won. She ran into the fog, taking one last look. The lantern's flame pulsed once, like a heartbeat, then vanished from sight, quiet as a shadow. The escape. She ran for hours. The village seemed endless, paths folding back on themselves. Finally, she stumbled into the mountains out of sight, her clothes torn, hands bleeding, heart pounding. Behind her, the wind carried a faint whisper. Until next time, she didn't stop running. The aftermath. Mara never spoke of the lantern. She moved far away, changed, haunted by the faces in the flame. And yet, sometimes in the night, when she was alone, she could feel the heat of the lantern's fire on her skin, smell the scent of charred bone. And she knew with certainty that one day, the bone lantern would find its way back. The fire had nearly died. Only glowing coals remained, casting long, shivering shadows across the circle. The storyteller leaned in, voice a hushed reverence. Some stories end, and some stories only pause. The bone lantern waits, and with it, the truths, the terrors, and the souls it has claimed. But the night is long, and the world is wider than these woods. A branch snapped in the distance. The fire flickered. This is the end of one night, one season, but the forest never sleeps. The watchers, the ponds, the stitched mouths, they linger, they remember, and new horrors stir where no eyes have seen. Yet, the storyteller smiled faintly, shadows curling around their face. Rest now if you can, but know this, the embers will burn again. And when they do, we will begin anew. The wind carried a faint, unfamiliar whisper, like laughter, like a song, like a warning from deep, unseen places. Season 3 waits, and it will find you.